Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to the Bert Salazar Retirement Show. My name is Bert Salazar, and I'm going to be the host for the next 30 minutes or so. I have a great informational piece to bring to all of you. And, it's January of 2022, so I'm cautiously optimistic as to what 22 is going to bring. It all depends on what's going on from a political perspective, also what's happening throughout the world, especially in Eastern Europe. We're going to go into another war, what's going to happen there and so forth. And we have just had a very challenging 2021. As I kind of went through in my last podcast, as of December now, the inflation rates in the U.S. On the average are at 7%. It's the highest it's been in the last 40 years, so that's very challenging for all of us and all of you that are either about to enter retirement or are already in retirement. So this is episode 168. So once again, thank you all for being such a loyal follower and followers for so many years. We're excited to be here as always. And the title for this episode, which is going to be a critical one, because hopefully from this episode moving forward and now into 2022, all of you are going to start putting your financial life in perspective. And the title for this episode is Retirement Dilemmas, and the fact that you can never hit a target that you can't see. So what I'm going to try to do for all of you is kind of walk you through the things that I feel are going to be very, very important as you prepare for your retirement years and the challenges and the opportunities that you're going to have further down the line. So for me today, it's an important one because I'll give you my thought of the day. And my thought of the day is that the only way to start at the top is when you're digging a hole. And the best way to get out of the hole is when you stop digging. And one of the challenges that I have with many of the clients that I engage for the first time is is that although, they have dug themselves into a financial hole because of all the financial decisions that they have made in the past and so forth, instead of just stopping the digging, they continue to dig deeper and deeper because they don't understand financial matters. And that's a major problem for them as they move through their retirement lives or preparation for their retirement lives. So if you're going to be retiring the next 6 months to a year, or even for those of you that are already in retirement, what are some of the critical questions that retirees need to be able to answer, not only for themselves, but also for their families? And the sooner you get to answer each and every one of these questions, the better you and your family are going to be in retirement. Now, sadly enough, most of the retirees that I engage for the first time have not been able to answer and did not prepare to answer any of these questions. And that's why most of them are going to have challenges in retirement. So what is the retiree dilemma? And there are a number of them, but I'm just going to give you a few because of my experience of doing this, for almost 35 years of my life as a retirement strategist and a tax planner. Number one, many retirees are going to fail in retirement, and you may very well be one of them. And the reason why most retirees are going to fail in retirement is that they failed to prepare for retirement, which is some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Another sad story is that most retirees are clueless about retirement issues and concerns. Most retirees that I meet for the first time, or people that are not far away from retirement, they're clueless because they really haven't done any type of due diligence. They haven't really done their homework into identifying what would be the issues that may impact our retirement at some point in time in the future. Another big issue, another big point is that retirement suffering will extend beyond the retiree's life expectancy because, if you're married and you make some retirement mistakes, those retirement mistakes are going to continue to carry over even when you're gone, because those retirement mistakes are going to be impacting your surviving spouse, whether it's a he or a she. It will continue to impact them until such day as they also pass away. Many times it goes beyond your surviving spouse. Could go to, like in your children or grandchildren, or if you have a special needs child that you need to provide for, whether you're alive or dead, whether you're in this world or not. Those are things that are going to be carried over for many, many years to come, and perhaps even decades. Many times, though, retirees are trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. And this is something that I see often because they come in, they bring me all their statements, they bring me all their expenses, and they bring me a lot of the stuff that they should have been working through for a few years in preparation for retirement. And all of a sudden, after I go through all of it, they go, oops, is there a way that I can put the toothpaste back in the tube? And the answer is no, you can't do that. You can move forward and start to repair some of those damages, but the sad part of it is you're not going to be able to put the toothpaste back into the tube. Now, we'll be talking about some of the questions, the most, for what I consider to be the 10 most important questions that you need to ask yourself in retirement and that you need to have an answer for in retirement, but they all fall and they all gather around what I call the fatal four. The major four issues that Americans are going to be facing in retirement that you need to be able to address. The risk of dying too soon, the risk of living too long, the risk of living with a disability, and then last but not least is the risk of living with eroding factors, and I'll cover the eroding factors in the next few minutes. So let's talk about question number one. What would be the first question that you should be asking yourself if you're getting ready for retirement? Well, the question is, how old will you be when you run out of money in retirement? And now all of you may say, well, probably, Bert, why am I going to run out of money in retirement? I have no intentions of running out of money in retirement. But most of you will. Most Americans are going to run out of money before they run out of life because they really haven't done their due diligence in preparation to answer that question. So what are some of the answers that I can give you? Well, number one, I feel this is the most important question in retirement, in your retirement arsenal, because at the end of the day, if getting old is bad, getting old and having no money is even worse. So what is your current retirement nest egg? In other words, how much money do you have set aside for retirement? Is it taxable? Is it tax-free? What's your current lifestyle? Are you a saver? Are you a spender? Do you live below or above your means? If you live above your means, do you feel that you're going to be able to maintain that lifestyle for years to come? What is your current tax bracket? That's another question that will determine whether you're going to run out of money or not. What is the difference between your marginal tax rate and the effective tax rate? The marginal tax rate is where your last dollar falls into the bracket from a taxable standpoint. The effective tax rate is the amount of taxes that you actually pay at every step of the bracket that you step into as you start to do your taxes on an annual basis. So there's a big difference between the marginal and the effective. The lower your effective tax rate, the better you're going to be. What is your personal inflation rate? Now, I just mentioned at the very onset of this podcast that inflation in the United States is hovering around 7%, but some of the real items that we purchase every day are much higher. The cost is much higher than 7%. So the question is, well, what is your personal inflation rate? Because you have the global inflation rate that includes that inflation rate of the United States, but there's also the personal inflation rate. What is your personal inflation rate? For instance, do you drive a Chevrolet or do you drive a Mercedes or BMW? Do you buy meat, or are you someone that doesn't eat meat? Do you take one vacation a year, or do you take 4 or 5 vacations a year? Where do you travel to on vacation? Because in many different ways, although you cannot control the global inflation rate, in many ways you can control your personal inflation rate by making better decisions regarding your retirement choices as you enter retirement either now or at some point in time in the future. What is your projected longevity? This is a big question that you should be able to answer. Now, no one ever dies at the right time, and this is something I tell my clients often, and no one really knows when your name is going to be called. But you can do some due diligence. You can do some projections. How are you doing from a health standpoint? Are you in good shape? Do you work out often? Are you overweight? Are you a smoker? Do you have diabetes? Do you have any ailments that would reduce your standard of living? You can actually go online and do a longevity probability forecast for yourself just by answering a few medical questions. Also, figure out your family. How long did your parents live? Do you have any siblings? Are they still alive? Do you have grandparents? How long did they live? So there are a lot of things that you can do in order to determine longevity. And always try to be conservative, because at the end of the day, the more time you have on your side of the ledger, the better off you're going to be. Now, you can get hit by a bus tomorrow, and the mathematics they're only statistical from a business standpoint, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to find a way to forecast what your longevity probability would be. And then last but not least, in question number 1, is what is your risk tolerance for volatility? In other words, where do you have your investments? Do you have investments in accounts that are extremely safe and earn no interest or very little interest to speak of? Or do you have accounts that are very highly volatile, where yes, you have a propensity to earn more, but you also have a propensity, for major losses along those lines? So let's go into question number 2 now. How much income will your retirement savings produce? Let me repeat that again. How much income will your retirement savings produce? And this is an important one. What is your current net of inflation rate of your return on your retirement savings? You see, everyone looks at retirement savings and retirement rates of returns, and they say, well, I'm getting a 6-7% rate of return. Yes, but is that 6-7% rate of return net of inflation? Because remember, inflation is an additional tax, and inflation is not tax deductible. So in the US for 2021, if inflation is at 7%, you need to be able to earn at least 7% to offset inflation, because otherwise you're going to be losing the purchasing power of your money on an ongoing basis. And then you have to factor in taxes. So if you factor taxes and inflation and you're earning 7%, great, you're breaking even. But if you're only earning less than that, then you're losing those purchasing power of the purchasing power of your dollars every single day of the week. Is your retirement income taxable or tax-free? That's important if you want to determine how much income will your retirement savings produce. Because if you don't have to pay taxes on your retirement income, then that alleviates the additional tax burden, and it gives you a little bit more leverage for you to maintain your standard of living. Now, how's your retirement income taxed? Is it traditionally ordinary income, where the tax rate are going to be higher, or do you have capital gains income? One of the major advantages that the wealthy have over the average American or even middle class Americans is that a lot of their retirement income comes from capital gains. And capital gains are taxed at a lower rate than ordinary income taxes. See, you're starting to see, and we've only covered 2 questions, you're starting to see how many questions you should have addressed or you should be addressing as you start to prepare for retirement if you want to succeed in retirement. And then the last question, the last answer here would be, what is the volatility ratio on your retirement portfolio? If the market drops, by how much will your portfolio drop? And are you comfortable with that? Is it more than 10%? Is it more than 20%? Is it more than 30%? These are things that are very critical for each and every one of you to address and to understand. Question number 3, how much income is needed for your retirement lifestyle? Now, that's another important one. And the answer to that is, well, it depends. What are your monthly fixed expenses? What are your monthly variable expenses? Do you have lingering debts? And if so, how long before they're paid off? Those are things that are very important. What kind of retirement lifestyle will you pursue? If you enter retirement, are you going to go into full retirement? Are you going to go into partial retirement? And if you're going into partial retirement because you may be, working on a part-time basis, or you may want to take a hobby that you've had for years and turn it into a business, how long are you going to do that for? So all of those things will help you as well to determine how much income you're going to need for your retirement lifestyle. And one final question / answer there is, do you intend to travel and or reside or live outside the United States? Because many Americans are now looking for ways to live outside the U.S. because they want to reduce the cost of living when they're living abroad. A lot of Americans are now living in South America or Central America. A lot of them are moving to Europe because of the fact that living outside the U.S., at least with the U.S. dollar, is going to give them a little bit more leverage when it comes to retirement expenses. So those questions are critically important, because if you don't have a clue or you haven't addressed these questions with your spouse, if you have one, then it's going to be very challenging, because your spouse may want something different than you do. And have you had what I call a CTJ, a come to Jesus meeting with your spouse, regarding the future, regarding retirement, regarding living standards, and many of the things that we're talking in this podcast and that we'll continue to talk about in the next few minutes. Question number 4, how much will tax levies impact your retirement income accounts? See, now you're starting to see a pattern. In each and every one of the questions that we'll go through today, you'll notice that some of the answers go back to the same issues, because they're all intertwined, and they need to be addressed not only separately, but also congruently. So going back to the question, how much tax levies impact your retirement accounts, meaning, how much are you going to have to pay in taxes for your retirement income? Well, how are your tax buckets designed? As you know, there are 3 types of tax buckets. You have your taxable, tax deferred, and tax free. Your taxable is where everything goes in, gets taxed, and when it comes out, is taxed. And there you have your checking accounts, your saving accounts, your money market accounts, your CDs, and so forth. From a taxable standpoint, the taxable bucket is not a very good one, but it does give you the freedom of liquidity and the ability for you to have an emergency fund, which is very, very important in retirement. Now, the tax deferred bucket, that's the traditional 401ks, IRAs, annuities as well, where the money that you put in, is pre-tax, the money grows tax deferred, but then when you pull the money out, you have to pay taxes on the whole thing. So how much of your assets are in the tax deferred bucket? And then the last bucket is the tax-free bucket, where the money goes in after tax. The money grows tax deferred, but then when you pull it out, is totally tax-free. So the question is, what percentage of your retirement assets are either in the taxable, tax deferred, or tax-free bucket? Based on my personal experience with all my clients, anywhere between 75% to 85%, and I've seen it even higher, but anywhere between 75% and 85% of retiree assets are usually found in the tax deferred bucket, meaning that if taxes rise in the future, then they're going to have a much higher liability because that tax deferred bucket has not paid taxes on those accounts, and now they're going to be exposed to a higher tax liability than ever before. So having the proper balance between the taxable, tax deferred, and tax-free bucket is critical if you want to survive your retirement life. Are your monthly retirement benefits taxed as ordinary income or capital gains? There we go again. If you have investments in properties or you have stocks that you sell and you capture that capital gain, well, those are taxed at a much lower rate than traditional ordinary income tax rates. How about your Social Security benefits? Are your Social Security benefits taxed? And if so, at what percentage? And that's where provisional income calculations come into play that I know most of you have never even thought about doing. As a matter of fact, I would argue that other than listening to me talk about provisional income for the past 3.5 years, none of you know what provisional income calculations are. And that calculation is going to determine what percentage of your Social Security benefits are going to be taxed in retirement. And just so you'll know, for those of you that a percentage of your Social Security benefits is going to be taxed either at 50% or 85% of those benefits are going to be taxed, you're going to run out of money anywhere between 5 to 7 years sooner than people that do not pay taxes on their Social Security benefits. And the reason for that is simple. If you have to pay taxes on your Social Security benefits, that means that you're going to have to take more money out of other accounts in order to offset that tax deficiency in those Social Security benefits. So you're going to be invading more principal and interest in other accounts in order to offset that liability. So that's why those that pay taxes on Social Security benefits end up running out of money a lot sooner than expected. Where do you think that taxes will be in the future? Are they going to be higher and lower or remain the same? Now, if you tell me they're going to be lower, then I suggest you seek some medical attention because you have no clue as to what's going on in the world, especially in the United States. And finally, to answer question number 4, is have you ever prepared a retirement tax planning report? If you've never done one, it may behoove you to put one together because at least you know where you're going to be in the future. And this is something where my specialty comes into play in helping my clients not only decipher all of these questions that we're talking about today, but also figuring out where they're at financially today and how we can make a paradigm shift in getting them to where they need to be in the future. Question number 5, how much of your retirement income is guaranteed? This is a big one. So other than your Social Security benefits, do you have other income guarantees? Do you have a guaranteed pension? Is it a public pension or is it a private pension? If so, if you do have a pension, does your pension provide a guaranteed COLA? A COLA is a cost of living adjustment. So those are questions that are very, very critical. Do you have a self-created pension look-alike plan? In other words, have you taken any of your personal savings and created a look-alike pension for you and your family? Do you own any income annuities? And here's a big one. In a perfect world, what percentage of your retirement income would you want guaranteed? If your answer is not 100%, then you need to seek medical advice because you're not doing well mentally. Because I can tell you, most, if not all of the retirees that I have in my portfolio that have most of the retirement income guaranteed, they get to sleep at night, and the only thing they need to worry about is waking up on the green side of the grass the next day, because they don't have to worry about where the next paycheck is going to come from. So in my case, I would want to have 100% of my income be guaranteed in retirement. Now, some of you may be at 75, 80 that you would want to be there. That's fine. That's really good as well. Most Americans, only about 15% to 20% of their income is guaranteed. The other 75 to 80%, or 85 to 80% is non-guaranteed, and that formulates a major challenge for many of them. Question number 6. How much will your retirement income go down, or actually how much will your income go down if the stock market crashes? Again, what is the volatility ratio in your current retirement portfolio? Have you done one? Do you know what it is? Are you a conservative, aggressive, or anything in between investor? By the way, one of the things you're going to find out if you have portfolio mutual funds during 2008 when we had the market crash, all of those retirement portfolios went down at the same time because many of the same companies that were found in the aggressive portfolios were also, to a lesser extent, in the our conservative portfolio and some of those portfolios in between. So you have to be careful. You have to know, if you have a mutual fund portfolio, what of the companies are inside each and every one of those portfolios, and how do they relate to the other portfolios that you have in your retirement strategy. Do your retirement assets trade between support and resistance level? Support is when the market drops and it goes to a certain level, and it's been there a few times, but it doesn't go below that. But then when it rises, it hits what we call the resistance level. So what's the handicap, or what's the arbitrage between your resistance level and your support level? The wider it is, the more volatility you have in your portfolio and the more challenges you're going to have in retirement. But I'm certain that most of you, if not none of you, have ever done any of these calculations along the way. If your retirement assets drop by more than 10%, will you continue to withdraw income from those accounts? And if the answer is yes, well, Houston, we have a problem, because now you have an asset that is dropping in value, and on top of that, you have to dip into those assets and take distributions in order to maintain your standard of living. So therefore, you're creating a double whammy, because your assets are going down because of the stock market, and on top of that, they're going down because you have to get those withdrawals whether you want or not. And do you have a viable emergency fund? See, that's where the bucket, the taxable bucket, is so important, because you should always have money in those buckets that if the market drops, that you can start drawing from those emergency funds that have very little volatility and allow the rest of the portfolio to hopefully recover soon enough until you have to go in and take some additional money. So it's all intertwined, it all plays. See, most Americans look at their finances through a microscope. Very few Americans look at their finances through a telescope. And the sooner you start looking at your finances through a telescope, the better decisions you're going to be making for yourself and for your family. We're getting toward the end of this podcast. Question number 7. What percentage of your retirement assets are protected against interest in stock market volatility? This is a big one, because when the market drops 10, 15, 20, 25, 30%, and you have to live off of those assets, now you're creating a major challenge, and you're going to run out of money before you run out of life. So how do you answer that? Well, here are some of the questions, or the rhetorical questions that you need to be asking yourself. Are your retirement assets invested in stock market volatility funds, like individual securities, mutual funds, ETFs, others? There's a lot of volatility, although the market has been doing real well for a number of years, at least I would say now 11 years, but nobody thinks of what the market did in 2008, because we human beings have a very short memory, and we don't appreciate when things go bad. Can you imagine if you would have been in retirement in 2007, 2008, and 2009? How do you think your retirement assets would have done? How do you think your lifestyle would have done at that point in time? Are your retirement assets invested in interest-sensitive investments, like bonds, treasuries, CDs? If they are, then obviously inflation is eating at your assets away, because the rate of return on those investments are not apropos, they're not comparable to the type of retirement returns that you should be receiving if you're trying to offset inflation in the United States and perhaps even throughout the world. Do you have volatility buffer retirement programs? Those are in retirement programs where your principal is always protected. And if you have a principal protection in your retirement arsenal, then you're a lot better off than if you don't have, and you're totally exposed to what the market would do to you and your family. Do you have fixed annuities, index annuities, guaranteed income annuities, or a combination thereof? If you do, then now your retirement assets are a lot more protected, and they're able to provide more income to you in retirement without having for you to lay awake at night, or for those issues to be keeping you awake at night because of the fact of not knowing where the volatility is going to be the next day when you have to draw that check at the very beginning of the next month. Question number 8. Do you have sufficient assets to maintain your family's lifestyle in case of a premature death? Listen, at the end of the day, no one ever dies at the right time. And I've never met a widow that did not believe in life insurance. So, these are things that are happening. I've been a retirement strategist for almost 35 years. I have had a number of my clients pass away, and I have had to deliver death claim proceeds to the family members and the surviving spouses, and it's not pretty. But these are things that are important, because I know most of you think that you're going to live forever, but the fact remains that you're not. So what does your family income replacement program look like? If you don't wake up tomorrow morning, what is your family going to do? What is going to be their financial situation? Are they going to be able to make it for the next 6 months, for the next year, 3 years? Are they going to have to make any changes to their standard of living? Are they going to have to sell that beautiful home that you bought for them, 25, 30 years ago, and that you raised your family and children there? They're going to have to sell it in order to move to a lesser neighborhood, in order to be able to offset that paycheck that is no longer coming in because you're no longer with us. What percentage of your income is replaceable upon your death? That's another critical question. Have you done the mathematics? If you do own life insurance, is it enough? What percentage do you need? What is your family going to do with the life insurance proceeds? Are they just going to pay off stuff and then have no debt, but that have no income to move forward? Or are they going to use that asset as an income replacement and generate interest off of it in order to maintain their lifestyle? Is the income replacement permanent or temporary? So if you own life insurance, is it term or is it permanent? Is it owned or is it leased? Because if you buy term insurance at the age of 50 and that policy dies at the age of 80 and you die at age 81, guess what? Your family gets nothing. And you have spent 30 years of paying premium to get nothing in return. You would have been better off just taking that premium and investing that premium on an annual basis over a 30-year period. Another critical question that most retirees don't think about: does your income replacement program include Social Security replacement? See, if you're married and you're filing jointly and you're both retired, you're both receiving Social Security benefits. Yes, at the death of one of the spouses, the surviving spouse is going to pick up the higher of the two Social Security benefits, and that's a good thing. The bad thing is that you lose one of the Social Security benefits. So do you have Social Security income replacement? Do you have enough insurance to offset that income replacement that you or your spouse is going to have to give up in order to pick up yours or theirs? And having a Social Security income replacement is very advisable when it comes to maintaining the lifestyle of a surviving spouse and or family member. And then last but not least, are you using life insurance as asset insurance? And if so, to what extent? What kind of life insurance policy do you own? Is it term or is it permanent? Is it leased or is it owned? If it's permanent, what type of insurance do you have? Is it a universal life? Is it an index universal life? Is it a variable universal life? Is it a whole life? Each and every one of these life insurance contracts is like going to an ice cream shop, and there are different flavors. There are many different flavors of ice cream. Now, in your individual situation, it depends on what would be suitable for you and your family and what kind of replaceable income do you want to provide for them. But using life insurance as asset insurance is imperative and paramount if you want to provide for a true retirement existence for your surviving family at some point in time in the future. Question number 9, and we only got 2 questions left. Do you have sufficient assets to cover the added cost of long-term care illnesses during retirement? And this is a big one. This is a really, really big one. Because the longer you live in retirement, the higher the susceptibility for you to have a long-term illness. And what are some of the things that I see often with this? Well, what are the odds of a long-term care illness in retirement? Well, let me tell you what the odds are. Other than death, which is at 100% probability, long-term care is a close second at 70%. So 70% of people in retirement are going to have some kind of a long-term disability, and the older they get, the more challenging it becomes. Now, what are your personal odds? It goes back to, what is your personal economy or your personal inflation rate? What are the personal odds that you're going to have a long-term care illness? Well, what's your medical history? And what's the medical history of that and or your family? Are you a smoker? If you're a smoker, I can tell you that the probabilities are going to be much greater because you're going to have lung issues. What if you're obese? What if you're not in good shape and you're heavy? You're going to have some major issues as you get older in retirement. What if you have diabetes? Is it type 1 or is it type 2? And what can you do in order for you to prepare for retirement? Not only do you have to prepare financially, which is what many of my clients are thinking about, but they don't do anything about it, but you also have to prepare physically. Have you thought about joining a gym? Have you thought about, if you don't want to join a gym, have you thought about, just walking, 2 to 3 miles a day? Have you thought about doing push-ups? Have you thought about doing air squats? Have you thought about doing exercises that will get your muscles and your body moving in order to enjoy a much better retirement life? Do you have long-term care insurance? If you do have long-term care insurance, it's a use it or lose it. Because most of the long-term care policies available in the marketplace today, if you die in your sleep never needing long-term care, then whatever premium you paid is gone. So it's either use it or lose it. Now, you could also have what is known as leveraged long-term care plans in place that could be either insurance or annuity-based. So you can actually purchase a life insurance policy that also has a long-term care rider that in case you need money for long-term care, you can actually go into the death benefit and start pulling, your family can start pulling money out on your behalf in order to maintain your standard of living through the increase in medical expenses with a long-term care illness. And if you happen to die in your sleep, then your family gets a death benefit completely. So you're able to leverage your assets in a way that is going to be much better for you and your family, and someone is always going to get that benefit. Now, the same thing would apply with annuities. You can buy a long-term care-based annuity where the chassis of the annuity will provide an income for life, but if you become disabled, it'll increase that income to help you offset some of those medical bills that you're going to have in retirement. What kind of income will your long-term care program provide? That would be important because as inflation increases and the cost of medical care in the U.S. increases, you have to be careful not to fall short when it comes to the retirement income that you could be receiving. And then finally, question number 10. So I'm hoping that I have been able to open your eyes and to get you to start thinking, if you're in the process of retiring, of things that you need to start to address, either with your advisors, or if you want to reach out to me, you can do that and I'll help you along those lines. But make sure that you address all of these answers because they're going to make your retirement life a lot better than it would be otherwise. And then question number 10, are your retirement assets protected against internal and external eroding factors? That's one that we're all living, or that we just went through in 2021 in the U.S. What are the internal and external eroding factors? And the same way that we talked about the internal inflation versus the external inflation and so forth, I think we also need to address internal and external eroding factors the same way. So there are macro and there are micros when it comes to eroding factors. Some you actually have control over them. Others you don't. So for instance, although you cannot control taxes and inflation and stock market volatility and interest rate volatility, on the other side of that coin, you can actually control them by minimizing your tax liability, minimizing your personal inflation rate, finding vehicles that will help you minimize the stock market and the interest rate volatility. You also can minimize the financial fees and expenses and the opportunity costs of things that you're buying today. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to replace your car. Well, do you buy a $60,000 automobile, or do you buy a $30,000 automobile? Now, both are going to take you from point A to point B and back without any problem whatsoever. But if you choose the $60,000 automobile, then that's an opportunity cost, because once you pay for that car, you'll never get that money back. Now, if you choose a $30,000 automobile, or you buy that $60,000 automobile, 2 or 3 years later as a used automobile, then that money that you're saving, you can keep it in your personal economy and thus get a higher rate of return on that, because now you're micromanaging and macro managing your personal eroding factors. And then your propensity to consume is very critical in retirement. most Americans are consumers, so we want to overspend. You got to be careful with that. That's where income guarantees come into play, because the more guarantees you have, the less you have to worry about these issues, because you never know how long you're going to live. So you gotta plan like you're going to live forever, but you also have to protect yourself in the case that you won't, and that you're going to have a premature death, which is more than likely what's going to happen. So when it comes to the major internal and external eroding factors that you need to pay attention to, taxes, inflation, stock market volatility, interest rate volatility, financial fees and expenses, opportunity costs, and propensity to consume. So I'm hoping that you have enjoyed this podcast today. Always remember, if you need to get a hold of me, feel free to call me at area code 786-766-1042. You can also send me an email at Bert, B-E-R-T, at bertsalazar.com, BERTSALAZAR.com. And always remember that my goal for you and for your family is to help you change the way that you see things, because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So once again, I know I said it the last time, I want to wish you all a wonderful new year in 2022. I'm hoping that all of your goals and dreams and objectives come true for you. But always remember that preparation or success is when preparation meets opportunity. So you should all be prepared. We should all be prepared. And I'll talk to you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.